give you guys a technical intro to Morpheus Data Hybrid Cloud Management. I've done a little bit of this before, so this may be familiar to some of you if you've already seen it. But if you pay some attention, you will notice there's a lot of new goodies that have been added to the product over the past year since the last time we did this. So keep an eye out for that. First off, one thing we want to mention is Morpheus has a very agile release cycle. So as we get into this and we start talking about self-service, we do have a consistent release cycle where we actually release a long-term support version every 4 weeks and a standard release on a varying cadence. And that's really where we are free to add features. This allows us to move very quickly. That's why you'll see some of the stuff with the Morpheus product, how it moves so fast within a year. Looking at Morpheus today versus looking at it a year ago will look drastically different than you may have seen before. So, and it does this every year. And this is one of the reasons we're able to do that and maintain that stability and top-notch support within our company. So just want to highlight that. So I'm going to dive into Morpheus's self-service. And one of the things, Brad kind of set it up pretty well, is there's a lot with self-service that Morpheus performs, not just from VMs or services or cloud native, but also operational workflows, things like that. But to accomplish that, we also needed all those other pieces. So really at the start, just to give you an idea, we're going to start with instances. So when provisioning an instance, this is kind of the view you would see in Morpheus. And you can see they range in type, right? It could be a service. It's really more representative of a service. We got a RabbitMQ here. We got something running on Kubernetes. We've got some generic operating systems or even Azure's SQL Server DBaaS. So you kind of get this generalized view, right? I can also easily provision an instance and prevent this catalog of those instances. And you'll notice the technologies, they tell you, hey, is this a bare metal, is this a container-based layout, or a VM, or both? I like to start with Apache. It's just really simple from a demo perspective, but they can be way more complicated, like Mongo clusters or things like that. So the first thing Morpheus does differently, and this goes into our policy management a little bit, is we have groups for organizations. So I'm going to pick a group. And then I'm going to pick a cloud. And the clouds are also associated to the group. So your groups also restrict what clouds you can provision into as well. So I'm going to actually open up the AWS Labs really quick. And the reason I want to do that is you'll see here in a minute with the public cloud, and then I'll go back to VMware. You'll notice here this name is locked. This doesn't have to be. This is an example of an enforced policy and a naming policy. So I'm just strictly enforcing that naming policy here. So I'm going to hit next and skip over that. All right. So one of the things you'll notice is this form just adapted based on that target cloud. That's really important. We want to really highlight that Morpheus is adaptable to the target cloud to perform cloud-specific needs. For example, I can pick an Amazon size, right? I can just say, hey, I want a T2 small. You'll notice this core and memory count adjusts and a projected cost adjusts. So it's estimating it's going to cost me $22.60 a month. I can even pull up a cloud price comparison. We'll get more into that when we start talking about FinOps later on. But this is a really cool way to just say, hey, is this instance the cheapest place I could put it based on the clouds I've had in my environment? So we're going to leave that out. The next thing I can pick is a VPC. In this case, you see a titled resource pool. That's because we did generalize that concept. Azure resource groups fit into this concept. VMware resource pools and clusters fit into this concept. OpenStack projects, things like that, or Amazon VPC. So I'm going to pick the Labs VPC. And then you'll notice this is one of the things I want to highlight, these storage types. These are very cloud specific. So this adjusts based on the target cloud. So if I'm in VMware, I'm picking data stores typically or storage profiles. In Azure, I could do managed storage. So you can see I add multiple disks and things like that. So very adaptable. Next thing I can do is I can pick a network or use a demo preferred network. And we'll talk about this. This is where some magic happens with Morpheus that makes on-prem consumption really powerful. Is its integrations with IP address management services and native integrations with things like NSXT and NSXV, where we can automatically bridge those connections for your on-prem cloud and present a truly self-service portal. So I'm going to pick a security group here and just hit next. And you get some other options. This supports code deployment. So another feature Morpheus has, I can support code deployment. I can run an optional workflow, a phased workflow on top. I can create an ELB if I wanted to, or an F5 NetScaler A10, depending on what I want to do. I can set some horizontal scaling threshold rules or use, you'll notice, not only does Morpheus have the ability to do your scaling, you can also leverage that cloud native scaling group. Your backup integrations can be configured. I've got them turned off for the demo environment. as well as life cycle. So maybe I want to shut this off at night. I don't need it at night, so let's just do a nightly power down. Then it's going to shut it down permanently after a day and delete it after 2 days. And that's a policy as well, and that's really useful. Next, I get this nice review, and I can hit complete. And that's really all there is to it. I can drill into this instance. I can see I'm preparing my resources. Now, remember, this may not be a VM. This could be a container. This could be a deployment in Kubernetes. It could be any type of bare metal workload, or cloud native service. So that's going to deploy, and then we're actually going to get stats and tracking and all that magic as well within here. So let me go actually show you one that's already up.
Hey, David.
So let's just grab one. Go ahead.
When you were showing those plans, like the different sizes in AWS, are you able to tag any of those or automatically pull the tags for like free tier? So let's say I wanted to set up a group that could only use free tier to mess around with the service. Could I use that tag?
Yeah, you do have granular permission control on those, and you can associate those to groups. So you do have control on the sizes and things like that as to what you can expose. Yep. You can also apply your own pricing to them as well. So it does nightly sync like your cloud native pricing, but if you wanted to override those, apply a percentage markup or a fixed markup or even a markdown situation, you can do that as well within the price planning as well.
David,
really quick here. Go ahead.
Probably I missed something, but is it possible to define an auto-scaling group?
Yes. So that's done at provisioning. In the scale tab, I could have chosen Amazon scale group, and then I would get presented with some options specific to that, or an Azure scale group. Another thing to mention is, remember, we're also providing services for all these other clouds. Some of them don't have that technology, right? So Morpheus is also capable of doing that as well. So that's part of the scale tab here. I can actually go in and actually modify it. So I can say, hey, I want to do a threshold-based scaling group. So I can say, let's use this, and I can define these for reuse. So there's an actual space to manage this, and this can trigger, hey, do you want to enable auto upscale, auto downscale based on a memory, CPU, disk threshold, or an event? Those types of things can be
cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. One thing also you can do is you can actually do scheduled scale thresholds. So if you know, like in December, the holiday season, you want to actually behave differently to pre-scale, you can actually configure that as well. Different things like that. All right, this instance is actually up and running, so that was pretty quick. That's why I like to do this one in Amazon as well. So you can see here, there's an instance up and running. I can click that. It's actually deploying a little application for us, just a simple web page, very simple demo, but it did also do that artifact deployment.
So David, you could actually use Morpheus to provision applications on top of that instance as well, like you know, Mongo or whatever or database you want to use and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's actually a perfect segue. You can actually kind of see that here. So when you provision something, right, there's multiple phases in our abstraction, and that's really where Morpheus shines. Is we create the resource, and in this case, the resource is the VM. And in this particular VM, Apache's pre-installed on it. It doesn't have to be. A workflow or task can be designed to install that on top. This is just a basic example. And they can run at different phases. There's pre-provision, provision, post-provision. As well as phases for teardown, resize, deployment. So you have injection points where you can add scripts, playbooks, chef recipes, things like that that can run at certain times within your service or workflow. And you can see here, this actually did a start instance. It actually deployed those files. It executed a script to restart Apache in this case. Well, that was stop. This is a permission script. So you can kind of see where that goes. This is actually a new history view, which is really nice. But that goes into that, if I go to provisioning automation, this is where you can kind of build those tasks out. You can see we've got a lot here, but I can actually define these and upload them into Morpheus as well, and even reference Git. So for example, say I wanted a shell script to run, just something simple, but I wanted to reference the shell script from a repository, maybe my TF examples, and I can actually reference that and reference the branch. That way all the code's offloaded into Git. We have really tight Git integration, which makes it really cool. Or I can just do local and paste it in. I have a nice code editor, things like that. So, and you can inject variables. So I can say, hey, when this runs on the instance, maybe I want to echo the instance name or any custom options you've defined for your instance. So can affect the behavior of your scripts. Doesn't have to be a shell script either. We actually have really awesome Ansible support, Ansible Tower and native Ansible integration. What's cool about our native Ansible integration is we're able to execute playbooks without SSH or WinRM to the workload, so you can lock that down and secure that via our agent. which is a pretty powerful benefit from a security perspective as well.
So can you do a full life cycle provisioning? So you said to go to the VM, go to the app. Then once you're done with that, do you do anything for testing to test that the whole end-to-end experience for the end user, I guess, before handing it over or something like that?
Yeah, that actually qualifies as what we would call our post-provisioning phase. So when the provisioning is complete, you can actually set some automation. Say you want to run a script or task or test, and then based on the failure or success state of that would affect the instance service state and the end result. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Now, we just showed simple instances. Those are the building blocks, and I am trying to be mindful of time. I know our test has some cool stuff to show you as well. One of the things we can do with that is more than just single instances, right? We can actually do multi-tiered applications. So I actually have an application blueprint defined here. Let's go ahead and grab it. I'm going to build an app, and it's a two-tiered application, right? So there it is. Now, I can give it a name, CFD11 demo. Put it in the demo group. Let's put it in AWS or AWS Labs and kind of see what this looks like. Now, it's defined a database tier, right? And this is actually, okay, I see. I picked the wrong group. So this one doesn't have a configuration for that. So let me grab a different cloud. Let me pick this one. I always pick the wrong one. There we go. So that's going to load up a pre-canned configuration, and you can lock these too. You see, these are locked. I can't change them. Same with Tomcat. So you have full control over that on the blueprint. But this is actually going to do a sequence provisioning of a database and a web server and create a load balancer all in one shot. So I can just hit next. I don't have to open these up. I could just hit next, review, complete, and off that goes. What really gets cool about this is that we've also added traditional views. From a DevOps perspective or an app developer perspective, this personally is my preferred way to do things. I want the visibility of what I'm provisioning and the control, the sizes, all that stuff. But you've got other use cases where you don't want to expose that. And for that, we've actually created personas. So you can actually build self-service catalogs based on these blueprints or instances, or even operational workflows that run arbitrary scripts or whatever it might be, API calls, that can expose catalog items for a user. We even actually add some ability to edit those, so you can actually see what that looks like. You can hit this configuration wizard, for example, to get that instance wizard you saw earlier to build these. So we provide that ability. And then when a user logs in, if they're configured as such, their default login persona could be the service catalog persona. And notice the whole context of Morpheus changes. I'm just a simple user. I don't need all that. I just need to order something. Maybe I want to deploy a Windows 2016 server. I can hit that. It actually presents a form input. What group do I want it in? This completely changes our wizard, right? You actually have full control of the wizard. Essentially, you can actually add your own option types or form inputs, custom dropdowns, things like that. And we provide more complicated ones as well for you to use. And then I can add this to my order. And this one actually, someone's actually decoupled this one in the demo environment. So that is a bad example. Let me just grab another one. I'll do the Apache Blueprint one we were just in earlier. You see this one changes a little bit. I can pick that demo, and then I can pick a T2 Nano, and I can add it to my order. It's even going to show that price. So now that's going to be in my cart right here. I can review that order, and place it. I could have ordered now as well and skipped this whole process, but it's just that cart-like experience, right? That marketplace. And now I've got an inventory related to that catalog item. I've got a special view for that. And this is actually a bridged inventory. So it's going to show if it's an instance, if it's a blueprint based, or if it's an operational workflow. And you can go in and see that execution history and things like that. So that's more of the traditional IT flow. And then I can actually just switch back to standard. But remember, we have fine-grained role-based access control. You can control what personas people have access to and what catalog items they have access to entirely. So that gives you an idea of self-service with Morpheus and some of the changes since last Cloud Field Day. There's a lot more there, but I think I will take it over to Martez to show some other cool benefits we can do with Terraform.
Can I ask you a question about the deployment model? I mean, this is a SaaS service in the end, right?
No.
It's not an
so
application
Morpheus,
you install on premises or...
It is an application you install on premises. So Morpheus actually deploys on premise and on your own architecture within about 15 minutes. we distribute it as a Yum or Debian package. You can run it on RHEL, SUSE, or Ubuntu or Debian. You can HA deploy it. You can do multi-site deployments. You have full control over that. We actually, it's so simple. We typically don't offer SaaS, but our partners do. And we don't really want to compete with them. And we do have several MSP partners that do that. That's a big part of our business.
Okay.
It sounds like you may be getting into this next, so I'll certainly wait if that is what's coming up. But my question was around infrastructure as code, and for customers that may do the build phase using infrastructure as code and pipelines to manage all of that. Are there tools that you can use to import that in and do the management with Morpheus, and how does that all work with an organization that may already have the build process kind of defined?
Right, that's a great question, and that's actually a perfect segue to Martez's area. I will mention on that before handing it off to you, Martez's. Morpheus is really good at bridging those gaps. If you've got a build phase versus handing it off to an application team, it's a little bit odd, and it kind of separates that almost too much. And Morpheus is really good at bridging those together. So if you have, say, for example, Terraform, and you want to use some Ansible to do some config management and application service deployment on top of that Terraform build, Morpheus is a great solution for that and actually orchestrates all those tools together to provide that.
Yeah, to kind of add some additional context to that question. So Morpheus does also enable discovery of existing resources. So potentially to the point of, I would like to deploy via another tool or another capability, and then have Morpheus come and then discover and manage those resources. That's totally possible. All right, so let's jump into it. Question came up, I'm sure it was, David, that was great walking through the GUI, but I want some Terraform, infrastructure as code. That's where the industry is going, where the organization is going. So what about Terraform and the Morpheus platform? So we have work on the Morpheus Terraform provider to enable what I typically refer to as a northbound integration with the platform. So taking advantage of all the things that David walked through, but instead of walking through the GUI or the API CLI, my organization leverages Terraform. And I want to continue using Terraform to get all the benefits of what Morpheus is able to provide as a platform. So I can leverage this to interface with the Morpheus platform, both from a management and configuration standpoint of Morpheus objects, but also to leverage Morpheus as an API endpoint for provisioning resources through Morpheus. And then we have what I typically refer to as the Southbound integration. So yes, it's great that I can use Terraform to call Morpheus, but I would also have existing Terraform collateral that I would like to continue to leverage, whether it's for public cloud, whether it's for private cloud scenarios. And I want to continue to use that, but I do want a platform that provides me with the self-service capabilities that Morpheus does. And so we have a Morpheus Terraform integration. Terraform instance types is what we refer to them as, which is recently released in our 5.3.1 release. So I'm sure the question is, why a Morpheus Terraform provider? So when we start thinking about, especially in the context of on-prem environments, you have a scenario where I would leverage Terraform, and I would need multiple Terraform providers in order to interface with, let's say, a vSphere to stand up a virtual machine. Then I would leverage a Terraform provider for integration or interaction with ServiceNow, a NetScaler. So when we think about large IT enterprise environments, on-prem environments, how can we leverage the capabilities that Morpheus has from the 90+ integrations out of the box to tie into the CMDB, the IPAM, the DNS to facilitate all these interactions in an automated fashion? And so when we look at after Terraform and Morpheus, instead of Terraform calling all these various different API endpoints, we essentially have Morpheus then be leveraged as a private cloud API endpoint. So think of a lot of what you would do with an Amazon or an Azure, that you would point that as a single cloud endpoint, leverage that provider to stand up all the various resources. But in the case of Terraform and Morpheus, and especially in an on-prem scenario, it still applies for public cloud to take advantage of all the integrations and automation orchestration capability, but it definitely brings out the capabilities of private cloud on-prem scenario, where we're looking at being able to leverage Terraform to call the Morpheus platform, and the Morpheus platform perform all the interactions and integrations with the various touch points in an IT environment to stand up a fully production-ready instance, or as David walked through, application stacks in a simple fashion. All right, so let's see it. It's great that you talked about the capability and the value of what it offers. Is there a question before I go to the demo?
Yeah, actually, you just confused me there at the end, because I think Terraform provisions everything, but now we're going to go from Terraform, have Terraform call Morpheus, and Morpheus is going to use the Terraform modules to deploy everything under there, plus add, I guess, your secret sauce of governance and the other pieces of Morpheus, or
nope. So
trying to understand how.
Yep, so the same thing that David walked through in terms of being able to leverage the Morpheus platform to interface with the various IPAM solution, DNS, all those different components. And so in this scenario, it would be Terraform calls the Morpheus platform as another way to consume the Morpheus platform. Instead of the GUI, instead of the service catalog that we walked through, instead of the API, in essence, this becomes a superset of the API. So being able to leverage Terraform to call the Morpheus platform.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, take a little mental reset, but yeah, simplifying that Terraform on-prem is a big use case we've seen a lot of interest in. So,
yeah, theoretically, if you did have the use case, you could have Terraform call Morpheus and Morpheus call Terraform to stand up or interface with another downstream system. We're not going to do a Terraform inception here. All right, so let's see it. Let's jump over to a little bit of code, not too much code, but the idea of being able to have a Terraform resource that I can leverage to interface with the Morpheus platform to stand up an instance. In this case, we're talking about a vSphere instance. So what this allows us to do is, as David walked through, we can create these various layouts within the Morpheus platform to tie all those various different hooks to the CMDB to automated execution. And so I can expose some of these simple parameters that automatically handle on the back end anytime it's provisioned to perform the integration with DNS, perform the integration with CMDB. And so what's happened is we're providing a simple interface for those that want to develop in Terraform to consume Morpheus and all of the benefits that it offers and it provides. So if I run a Terraform apply, we're not going to sit and watch this whole thing walk through, but what we're seeing is similar to as you would stand up a public cloud resource or even a vSphere VM using Terraform, you're getting the process of it creating the actual resource. As I mentioned before, the benefit is all of the phase-based workflows that David mentioned of being able to tie those into to automatically be performed so that we can have that really good governance of, yes, I need a resource in my on-prem environment, but I want all that stuff on the back end that, in our case, on-prem, that's typically taken care of in the public cloud of the networking and some of the storage constructs and all the low-level pieces that you would typically just get with, yes, I want something from Amazon or Azure, being able to have all that capability, but also being able to tack on all the benefits that we provide from an additional integration standpoint.
Yeah, if I may add something there as well, Martez, what's really cool about that, especially, right, if you're doing on-prem, a lot of times you have an IP address management solution like a BlueCat or an Infoblox or something like that. A lot of people are having to use those modules in their Terraform to deploy infrastructure on-prem as well as their vSphere modules or even NSX. But when you're actually providing a true cloud on-prem self-service, you abstract those complexities away from your DevOps team to need to worry about those. And really, they shouldn't have to. If you want to swap your IP address management solution out from, say, SolarWinds to Infoblox or whatever it might be, it makes it a lot easier to do that. And your Terraform is actually, still functional. So,
yeah, and it's also cleaner in a lot of ways to where I can specify a small set of resources when we look at the Terraform code, as opposed to very large blocks or very large chunks, or manage all of the additional modules on the back end that it needs to reference. So it helps simplify the actual Terraform code as well.
Just a question here. So you mentioned earlier that you could almost auto-discover resources and things of that nature going on. So you could have potentially used Terraform to deploy some applications and that sort of stuff, and then Morpheus could come in later and auto discover that those things exist and start monitoring and provide governance for those things.
Yeah, there's the inventory capability. So being able to leverage the Morpheus platform to hook into or integrate with an AWS, Azure, GCP, and perform that inventory process enables us to be able to discover it. Another option is to be able to leverage automation tied to the back of your Terraform to potentially facilitate that inventory process in a much faster way.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So we talked about how Terraform can call into Morpheus and be able to kick off the automated provisioning of workloads via Morpheus. And so now we talk about I have existing Terraform collateral that I know I love. I really want to keep using it. My organization has invested a lot into leveraging infrastructure as code with Terraform. And so that's where we have Terraform instance types. So it's the ability to consume Terraform within the platform. So I can present a self-service catalog item that allows users to request an environment, an application, whatever it ends up being. And on the back end, the actual provisioning is taken care of via Terraform. And so self-service catalog for simplified consumption. There's some of the benefits, phase-based orchestration workflow, some of the things that David walked through of being able to tie in those Ansible playbooks, those various components of the provisioning, as well as the decommissioning process. Support for day two resource management, some of the things we talked about of being able to have the ability to use the Morpheus platform for day two management of those resources from an instance perspective. And then one of the things we really have a benefit of Terraform instance types is composable units. So the idea on this slide on the right, where we can see a Morpheus blueprint could be composed of a Terraform instance type that stands up, let's say, VPCs and networking constructs in AWS, and maybe we then leverage that to deploy the application into that particular networking environment that was just deployed. So it provides us a lot of benefit to be able to consume Terraform within the platform in a way that is meaningful when we start talking about self-service. And so let's walk through really quickly that automation. So we talked about that phase-based workflow automation, and David touched on it, is why does that really matter when we start talking about Terraform? I got Terraform, I got some Ansible, I got some shell scripts and bash scripts. How can I leverage that capability? And so when we look at native Terraform automation, what typically happens is, let's say in the case of where Morpheus is calling Terraform, or even you're running the open source binary version of Terraform. So it stands up in this case, an EC2 instance in AWS. What then typically happens is I have my automation. So let's say it's an Ansible playbook I want to run against the EC2 instance that's been provisioned. Typically what will happen is I'll have an interface, either Terraform calls the automation, the Ansible playbook, or Ansible reaches into essentially the Terraform state to inventory that process. And then it then configures the instance as desired. Some of the challenge with that is it's a bit of a black art in a lot of ways. And it's the issue with it not being a scalable solution in a lot of ways. Oftentimes it's more that glue code that presents challenges and doesn't present a robust framework in terms of connecting that automation. And let's say a scenario where it's not just an Ansible playbook, it's other sets of scripts and capabilities from an automation perspective that we want to integrate. And so if we look at Morpheus automation and the benefit of that we walk through with the phase-based workflows. So we look at that same process where Terraform stands up the EC2 instance. And we then have, instead of Terraform calling the automation, we have Morpheus call the automation, which in this case, it could be something like an Ansible Tower. It could be our Chef integration. It could be our Puppet integration, various aspects of automation that we can tie into. This also applies for the provisioning process as well as the decommissioning process, which is a little bit more challenging when you start talking about being able to really clean up an environment that has been provisioned via Terraform of all the various hooks, not just the AWS resources or the Azure resources, all the different things of like, let's say I want to update the CMDB. I want to make sure the IP address is released properly, things like that. So then that facilitates the automation. The one other thing we're definitely seeing in the market is being able to then tie, let's say something like ServiceNow. We have a ServiceNow ITSM integration that can leverage ServiceNow as the request portal. And so this is a pretty common integration that a lot of companies are starting to look at, is that ServiceNow, Terraform Enterprise, Ansible Tower play. For us, this is a great opportunity in our wheelhouse where ServiceNow can front Morpheus. You can request catalog items via ServiceNow that get provisioned into Morpheus. Morpheus can then execute the Terraform to deploy the resource, and then it can then, let's say it's an execution of Ansible playbook or integration with the Ansible Tower to actually perform that post-provisioning configuration. So let's see it again. We'll jump through this really quick, Brad. So one of the things we got is an existing instance deployed. And so this particular instance was networking constructs of a VPC, a couple of subnets, and an internet gateway. So one of the things that I want to touch on is the ability we see what we term as spec templates to be able to have those composable units compose a Terraform instance type. So the goal is to have modular components to be able to mix and match. When we start talking about large enterprise organizations, having disparate teams, having different needs for, let's say, a security team needing to manage certain components, network team needing to manage certain components, then being able to compose those in a single platform, getting visibility into the state, getting visibility into the plan, being able to provide this in a self-service fashion is really the power of the platform and the capability with Morpheus and Terraform.
So how about the secret handling? I mean, if you use the integration with the Vault or do you have your own secret management system?
David?
Yes, we actually do. It's called Cypher. It's actually triple level encrypted, just like Vault is, AES 256-bit, and you have Cypher keys. It also has a Vault compatible API. So if you're doing lookups and you're used to using Vault, you can actually fully use it. You also can still use those drivers with Terraform as well. So if you're wanting to use like the Vault module and stuff like that, you're able to do that. But we do provide the TFR secret capability. It's tenant isolated, things like that. It is logged and tracked and has expiring keys. We even actually went so far when we start talking about Vault and HCL, we have our own HCL parser. So a lot of the stuff and the magic you're seeing with how we handle Terraform, we're able to parse your HCL to extract things like your variables and things like that to present nice, easy, concise forms.